What if I told you there's a document, carbon dated to over 4,600 years ago, that predicts the fall of humanity next year? What if I told you the government once banned an entire neighborhood from sleeping for 72 hours because people were dying the moment they closed their eyes? And what if, somewhere deep beneath Las Vegas, there's a place more secret than Area 51, where people don't just work, they vanish? These aren't just urban legends or creepypasta tales. They're first-hand stories, pulled from the darkest corners of Reddit, some so disturbing, so strangely specific, that they've left even skeptics speechless. Stories of showers that never turn off, children who whisper at bedroom doors with knives behind their backs, and girlfriends who collect the souls of their ex-lovers one by one like trophies in jars. The strangest part? Some of these events line up with real science, real disappearances, and real government records. You might be tempted to dismiss them, but the patterns, the details, they echo something deeper. So tonight, I want you to sit back, turn off the lights, and listen closely, because we're diving into 7 terrifying Reddit stories that might be more real than you think. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end, because every twist, every detail will make you question what's real and what's already here. Let me take you back to a moment in time that sounds like it came from a dystopian novel, but it actually happened. In the early spring of a forgotten year, no news coverage, no official explanation, a neighborhood in the American Midwest received a set of sealed red folders. Inside, a government mandate banning one very specific thing: hot baths. Not just discouraged, outlawed, under threat of force. Families were told to avoid steam, to stay cool, to not raise their body temperature under any circumstance. And those who didn't comply, within hours, they were hospitalized or worse. Now, I know what you're thinking. A ban on hot baths? It sounds absurd, like the opening scene to a satire or a failed science fiction film. But the stories that leaked out quietly, anonymously, told a much darker truth. One man reported that after taking a hot shower, his skin began to flake off in long, wet ribbons, like cooked wax. Another said his wife began hallucinating within minutes of soaking in the tub, screaming about a shape rising from the steam. And then there were the disappearances, the kind where only a ring of water and a few teeth remained. Here's the part that gets under my skin. I used to take long, hot baths almost every night. It was my ritual, my comfort. The idea that something so simple, so ordinary, could suddenly become deadly, it shook me. And it made me wonder how many everyday things could turn on us without warning. How many small rituals could open doors we were never meant to touch. Some believe it was caused by a fungal spore released through the plumbing. Others whisper about temperature-activated entities, beings that live in the vapor, feeding off the soft tissues of the human body. Me? I think it's fear that binds it all together. Fear that what we trust most, warmth, water, or routine, might be the very thing that kills us. The ban was lifted quietly, without explanation, just weeks later. But the people who lived there, they didn't go back to bathing, not like before. And some, they never came back at all. And that brings us to another story, one that begins not with a bathtub, but with a bedroom, a girl, a door handle, and the sound it made every night. Let me tell you what happened. There's something haunting about a mirror before dawn. Something ancient, something that feels watched. In ancient Greece, they believed looking into your reflection before you had washed your face was not just bad luck, it was an insult to the dead, not to yourself, but to those who still lingered in the folds of night. The act of staring into a polished bronze surface before your body had been cleansed by water and light was believed to invite something in, something that didn't belong in the waking world. And this wasn't just superstition. Back then, bathing wasn't just a matter of staying clean. It was a ritual, a threshold. You didn't step into the day until you had honored it, washed off the sleep, the spirits, the remnants of your dreams. To bathe was to separate the realms of night and day. And to skip that step, that was a sin, not moral, cosmic. I remember reading a story from an old monastery archive somewhere in Northern Europe about a woman who used to bathe late at night, alone, a strange choice for her time. She was later found drowned in a dry stone basin, hair soaked, lungs filled with air, not water. Locals whispered it wasn't drowning, it was punishment for crossing the veil uninvited. And if that sounds dramatic, remember this. For thousands of years, cleanliness was never just about health. It was about power. In some cultures, the clean body was considered sacred, blessed, touched by God. In others, the unclean were not just sick, they were cursed, cast out, marked. What's fascinating is how those beliefs changed and how they still echo today. During the Black Death in medieval Europe, people actually stopped bathing out of fear that warm water opened their pores and made them more vulnerable to plague. What had once been a sacred act became suspicious. Suddenly, to wash was to sin against survival. That shift from holy to dangerous isn't just history. You still see it now. Ever walked into a room and smelled bleach and felt safe? Or smelled something damp and thought disease? Our senses are wired by stories much older than we realize. I think that's why certain places, old bathhouses, crumbling monasteries, even your own childhood bathroom in the middle of the night feel unsettling. It's not the shadows, it's the memory of meaning. Our bodies remember rituals long after the world forgets. And speaking of memory, what if I told you your body might not even be yours anymore? Because in the next story, something inside a woman starts to wake up while she sleeps. And her boyfriend? He's been drugging her to protect himself. There was a time less than 700 years ago when stepping into a warm bath could get you killed. Not because the water was poisoned, not because someone waited behind the curtain with a knife, but because people believed that hot water invited the plague straight through your skin. During the height of the Black Death in medieval Europe, doctors and priests warned citizens against bathing in warm water. They thought the heat opened your pores and made you vulnerable to bad air, what they called miasma. To be warm, clean, and damp was to be exposed, a walking invitation for disease. It's hard to imagine now, but many people chose to remain unwashed for months, even years, out of fear. They believed dirt acted like armor, that sweat and grime sealed the skin and protected them from death. I remember reading this one letter, written by a mother in Florence to her daughter. She begged her not to use heated water, not even to wash her face. She told her to sleep in her clothes, to close the windows tight, and to never, ever breathe deeply in the morning. There was a tenderness in that letter, and a quiet horror too, because beneath every word was the same unspoken truth. We don't understand what's killing us. And maybe that's what makes these stories so deeply unsettling. The way fear can rewrite something as basic as how we clean ourselves. The way a hot bath, once a place of relaxation, prayer, intimacy, can suddenly become a silent threat. Sometimes, I wonder how much of that fear we still carry. Have you ever gotten sick and tried to sweat it out in a shower? Or avoided cold air because you might catch something? Science may have moved on, but our instincts, they still whisper the old fears. And the most terrifying part, they're not always wrong. Because in our next story, a man takes a shower, and 4 hours later, it's still running. But the person who turned it on, he's not supposed to be home. It sounds strange now, maybe even ridiculous. But there was a time when who bathed, when they bathed, and even what part of the body they washed wasn't just personal, it was political. In ancient Rome, bathing was a public affair. You didn't soak in solitude. You undressed in front of strangers, whispered gossip into the steam, and walked naked through marbled halls, right alongside senators and merchants and slaves. The bathhouse was where alliances were made, secrets traded, and rumors born. But when the empire fell, so did the tolerance for public nudity. Suddenly, what had been normal became shameful. And shame? Shame is a powerful tool. By the early medieval period, the church began tightening its grip not just on the soul, but on the body. Cleanliness, once a symbol of godliness, became suspicious. Monks were warned not to bathe too often, lest it tempt sinful thoughts. Women were taught to cover their skin, even when alone. And across much of Europe, bathhouses were shut down not because they were dirty, but because they were morally dangerous. That's the thing about history, no one really tells you. The way it ties your body to someone else's authority. The way power hides in plain sight under warm water and steam. Who gets to bathe regularly? The wealthy. Who gets soap and perfumed oils? Nobles. Who gets cold rags and river water? Everyone else. And even now, don't we still feel the echo of those rules? Think about it. How many of us feel uncomfortable being seen in a towel? Or think it's indulgent to take a long bath? How many times have we rushed to shower to avoid seeming lazy even when we're bone tired? I'll admit something here. For years, I took showers in total silence. No music, no thoughts, just 5 minutes to scrub and go. Not because I was in a hurry, but because I had been taught, subtly, over time, that lingering in the bath was a kind of weakness, a luxury I didn't deserve. Strange, right? How fast guilt can seep in even under hot water. But what happens when that guilt isn't just emotional, but becomes something physical? Because in the next story, one woman wakes up covered in bruises night after night. And her boyfriend? He swears he's never laid a hand on it. But the truth is far worse than that. For centuries, fear clung to water like mist on a bathroom mirror. Hot baths were seen as sinful, dangerous, even deadly. But then slowly, quietly, science began to push the steam aside. It started in the late 19th century, when physicians across Europe and North America began to revisit what had once been lost, the ancient belief that water could heal. But this time, it wasn't about spirits or sin, it was about circulation, hygiene, and germ theory. Doctors began to notice something odd. In cities where public bathhouses had survived, usually in poor immigrant neighborhoods, rates of disease were actually lower than in more affluent areas, with no regular access to bathing. Typhoid, cholera, skin infections, they were all less common where people simply washed. Not with expensive medicines, just water and heat. It was a revolution, a quiet one. Cities like New York, Boston, and Chicago began building municipal bathhouses not just for health, but as a matter of dignity. And for the first time in centuries, cleanliness became a right, not a privilege. But here's where things get interesting. Some of these bathhouses weren't just places to get clean. They were built like temples, columns, domes, marble floors. Why? Because the architects understood something we often forget. People needed to feel worthy of being clean again. And maybe that's why I've always loved places like onsens in Japan or hammams in Morocco. They don't just wash your body, they honor it. They remind you that warmth isn't weakness, that soaking in silence isn't indulgence, it's restoration. Still, even as science reclaimed water, the ghosts of the past never fully left. I've walked through old bathhouses before, the kind that have long been abandoned. The air smells like stone and rust. The tiles crack underfoot, and sometimes, if you stand there long enough, you can almost hear laughter echoing from the walls like the water remembers. But what if it remembers more than that? Because in our final story, the water isn't warm. It's ice cold. And a father wakes in the middle of the night to find his daughter at the door, whispering, turning the knob, again, and again, and again. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. All these stories of bans, of rituals, of fear and redemption, they sound like they belong to the past, like distant echoes from dusty pages in forgotten books. but I'm not so sure they're over. I'm not sure they ever really ended. We like to believe we're rational now, that science has stripped the world of its ghosts, that we don't make decisions based on superstition anymore. But then I remember how the world shut down almost overnight, not centuries ago, but just a few years back because of something invisible in the air. How we hoarded soap and disinfectants like sacred relics. How we treated anyone who coughed like a threat. Tell me that isn't familiar. Fear is timeless. It just changes shape. And water never stopped holding secrets. In fact, sometimes I wonder if we're just circling back to where we began. Ritual baths are returning. Cold plunges, steam therapies, ancient ideas rewrapped in wellness packaging. And once again, we're talking about cleansing not just the body, but the mind, the soul, the energy. But what if some doors shouldn't be reopened? What if something remembers the last time we believed the water could heal us? Personally, I still take long showers, still light a candle on the edge of the tub some nights. But every now and then, when the bathroom fills with steam and the mirror goes completely blank, I catch myself turning around just to make sure I'm still alone. Because whether it's a myth, a memory, or something much darker, we've always known that water is more than just water. And maybe, just maybe, it's watching back. If you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you. And if you've ever felt something staring at you through the fog, you're not the only one. See you in the next one. Don't forget to leave the light on